Is now live. Live. We are live.
Thank you so much. Good evening, friends. My name is Selailo and I am so delighted this evening to come to you in celebration of a living legend. And as the young people say, give the people their flowers while they are still alive. And so, friends, this evening we come together in partnership with the Center for Constructive Theology in celebrating the life and the times of Professor Itumeleng Mosala. And so as you join us, coming to suck from the breast of wisdom and academics and intellect, we invite you to be a part of this conversation. Please remember that you can put your comments on the comment section of the Wesley GuildSA page. And if you are part of the Zoom community, we also ask that you put your comments and your questions on the Zoom chat line. I am now going to give to our brother Boniso Kanyile to open for us with a prayer. And then I will do a brief welcoming remarks and chart the way forward for us. Welcome, and we look forward to spending this time with legends in this life. Brother Kanyile, are you here? Could you please open for us with a prayer?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, colleagues. I want to read briefly from Hosea 4, verse 6 before the opening prayer. Just briefly. My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. As we gather to learn and grow in our faith, we are reminded by Prophet Hosea about the importance of seeking knowledge, understanding, and wisdom in our lives as individuals and communities. Prophet Hosea warns us against the danger of ignorance and lack of knowledge. He states that the lack of knowledge leads to spiritual, moral, and physical destruction. Although, colleagues, in the context of Hosea, the verse was a warning to Israelites about the consequences of their spiritual ignorance and disobedience. However, the principle applies broadly to all the areas of life. So we are very grateful to God for the gatherings like this, where we are invited to drink from the well of knowledge and wisdom. Let us pray. Almighty God, we may be nothing when weighed on your heavenly scale, but you have allowed us to come before your throne through your Son, Jesus Christ, unworthy though we are. Now that we are before your throne, we are using that privilege to bring before you Prof. Mosala, who will be sharing with his wisdom with us this evening. We thank you for his life and for who he is in our generation. May you continue to bless him together with his family. Almighty God, now that we are before your throne, we are bringing before you the audience that will be attending this virtual meeting. Almighty God, no one can drink from the wisdom that you bring and remain the same. Help us to quench our thirst through the well of knowledge we are about to drink from. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, brothers. Boniso Kanyile, for that wonderful, short, and brief reflection. And so, friends, as a discussion anchor, I have been given the responsibility to look forward to during the next hour. And now we are going to be doing welcoming remarks, and I will do that in a short while. And then after that, we will have the introduction of the celebrant, and that will be done by our very own Prof. Stephen Hendricks. And following that, we have the very own, the majestic Professor Itumeleng Mosala, who will be telling us about his life and times. And so that some of us as young people can take notes and know exactly how he got to becoming the wonderful person and the big intellectual personality that he has become. And then following that, we are going to have a response on behalf of the Center of Constructive Theology, and that will be done by, again, our very own Professor Bani Pikiana. He's also no stranger to this platform. He has been part of us before. And then following that, we are going to have a vote of thanks and closure by our very own Reverend S.J. Mtetwa. And so while I was being asked to anchor this conversation, it took me back to 1998 when I was a student at the then Technikon Northwest, after it had transitions from Sethukhelo Technikon. And Professor Mosala was our vice chancellor. The one thing I can tell you, Prof, even at the time, made time for young people like us, hot-headed young people. He allowed us to voice our own feelings. And during my time at the Technical Northwest, he became a friend to the students. And that is why today, some of us are so honored to be able to anchor a conversation that speaks about his life. I'm now going to give to Prof. Stephen Hendricks to introduce to us our celebrant. May I also ask, while Prof. Hendricks is coming through, that you please keep your mics muted, that you keep your video off. The only people whose videos are supposed to be on are Professor Mosala throughout, and people who are going to be part of the program as I have outlined. And thank you in advance. Prof. Hendricks.
Well, good evening, my esteemed program director, and of course our celebrant, as well as all our participants who are here tonight. I was about this afternoon in discussion to introduce the short version, but then the ancestors spoke to me very seriously. And they said, introduce the man the way he should be introduced. So I'm going not to the long version, but to somewhere in between, just to share with you just the nature and the depth of the man who we're talking about tonight. At the personal level, I just want to quote 3 incidences quickly. There was a BMC meeting some time ago in Black Men's Council meeting in Johannesburg. And present was Judge Musaneke. And he gave his paper on justice and the law. Then came Professor Mosala. But the man came to the front table with about 20 books. And as he was lecturing, he paged through the books. Not with us like us putting an interleaf. He opened the book and he started reading from it. Many of the books that he's written. Just to show the caliber of the academic that we were listening to tonight. Secondly, I had the opportunity to take a visiting professor of Oxford University to the Methodist conference recently. And it was because there was no lift for him from Pretoria to welcome. Only to find that this was Professor Anthony Reddy. We had 3 hours of drive to welcome, 3 hours back. But the name that came up ever so often was Professor Itumeleng Mosala. He said, that man, that man is a tower. That man is a man who's planted the seeds for many of us to build on. And so I bring tribute via Professor Anthony Reddy from Oxford University, who's also a Black theologian. And thirdly, I recently visited the UK, and there they had the 5-yearly Oxford Institute of Methodist Theological Studies. Again, in the papers that was presented, the minutiae of suspicion, hey, Baba, came up. And it was elaborated, again, the work of Professor Mosala. So given that personal experiences of our celebrant, let me now go and talk a little bit more about him, because it's about him tonight and not about anyone else. He's undoubtedly one of South Africa's most foremost intellectuals. and a principal advisor on matters relating to government, politics, and business. His impressive track record has seen him play critical roles in both the public and private sectors, from advising government right through to providing strategic leadership on important global concerns such as nuclear energy. Today, Professor Mosala is at the helm of the South African operations of a Fortune 500 company, Westinghouse Electric, as its regional vice president since 2010 May to date. In this far-reaching foresight, wisdom, and tact and experience that Professor Mosala handles the delicate nature of forging smart partnerships necessary to handle the complexities of the adoption of nuclear power. We further see that from 2006 to date, Professor Mosala founded a number of successful enterprises, including financial services, advisory company, still nascent ventures. Prior to venturing to private practice enterprise, Mosala worked for the government of the Republic of South Africa, serving a 4-year term as Director General of the National Department of Arts and Culture from 2003 to 2007. Holding the highest executive position in the department, he was responsible for providing leadership, overall management, and strategic direction. Among his many achievements of the department, he successfully oversaw a budget in excess of 80 million for the national preparations for the all-important 10-year democracy celebrations, a key milestone in South Africa's post-apartheid history. His history as an academic intellectual and top educator adequately equipped him with the necessary knowledge required to lead the department of such significance and national importance. Between 1998 and 2003, Professor Mosala was the Vice Chancellor and Principal of the Technikon Northwest, as we just heard from Silo, which later merged with 2 other Technikons to become part of the Tshwane University of Technology. Before joining Technikon Northwest, Prof. Mosala took his formal role working for the Government Republic of South Africa's Chief Director, responsible for higher education from 1995 to 1997. In this role, he was the first head of higher education in the new democratic dispensation. He undertook this role at a crucial time of South Africa's transformation, with the end of the humanizing system of Bantu education and the introduction of a new system of learning that would conform to world standards. Professor Mosala is renowned the world over as an authority on theology and divinity. For 15 years, he lectured on these subjects at some of the finest universities in the world, from 1980 to 1995. From 1994 to 1995, he served as an esteemed professor at the University of Cape Town, Department of Religious Studies. Between 1991 and 1993, he was visiting lecturer at the prestigious Wesley House College, Faculty of Divinity at the University of Cambridge. In 1983 to 1994, Professor Mosala was a lecturer at the University of Cape Town, where he taught Black theology, African religion, Black studies, and where he lectured as senior lecturer and associate professor, head of the department. His tenure at UCT was preceded by 2 years at the University of Botswana, from 80 to 82, where he taught biblical studies, theology of liberation, and African traditional religions and Hebrew. Now, Professor Mosala's career as a lecturer in theology stemmed from his lengthy service as the minister in the Methodist Church of Southern Africa from 72 to 77. He attained a prestigious degree associate of the Federal Theological Seminary, AFTS, with distinctions in Hebrew language and literature from the Federal Theological Seminary of South Africa, after which Professor Mosala served his 6th year as an ordained here at the Methodist Church of Southern Africa. And he began his professional life as a teacher in 1971 after completing his teacher training in 1970 before joining Methodist Church in 1972. Mosala completed his master's in business administration attained at the Open University in the UK. Prof. Mosala also is a published author, social commentator, and a renowned speaker. He has written several publications and books and sits on various national committees and commissions. He is often called in to sit on advisory boards. Now, let me also just go to the literature. Books that is published, Biblical Hermeneutics and Black Theology in 1989. He co-authored with B. Klagali, The Unquestionable Right to be Free, published by Scotable. Also again with the same author, co-authored Hammering Swords in the Plowshares, Essays in Honor of Bishop Desmond Tutu. He also authored chapters in books, for example, The Ideology of Theology and The Theology of Ideology in the Black and White Church Struggle in South Africa in 1988. And The Ethics, another book, chapter where he wrote, The Ethics of Economic Principles, Church and Secular Investments, Hammering Swords into Plowshares. Further, the relevance of African traditional religions and the challenge to Black theology, The Unquestionable Right to be Free. And that book came out in 1986. Then the Biblical Hermeneutics of Liberation, The Case of Micah, came out in 1991. Violence and the Prophets, Theology and Violence, is an African debate, edited by Villa Vincencio. And then Ownership or Non-Ownership of Land, The Basis of Wealth and Poverty, a Black theological perspective in Plutocrats and Paupers, Wealth and the Poverty in the Old Testament. And so, furthermore, is also published in the Good News to the Poor, a Black African biblical hermeneutics, Good News for the Poor. And then lastly, The Politics of Debt and the Liberation of Scriptures in Tracking the Tribes of Yahweh in 2002. And so we find, colleagues, this is the man I'm introducing to you tonight. But furthermore, let me just go and also say that apart from his doctoral work, he was examiner for Federal Theological Seminary. He received honorary doctorates from various universities and did various consultancy work. But most importantly, also made me share, Professor Mosala is married to Louisa, and they are blessed with 2 wonderful children, grandchildren. He enjoys reading and writing, is an avid fan of South African jazz. Professor Mosala enjoys fine South African wine and has a taste for gourmet dining from all over the world. I present to you Professor Itumeleng Mosala. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Hendricks, for what a wonderful introduction to Tower, as we affectionately used to call him. And prior to me giving to Professor Mosala, I would like to read 2 things, which I can quote from Professor Reedy about Professor Mosala. And the first thing he says is, his confidence to speak Black truth to white power is unforgettable. And I think most of us can relate about Prof. Mosala when it comes to this. And he has done it without offending anyone. And the second thing that Professor Reddy says about Prof. Mosala is that there is something tantalizingly moving about realizing that you have found your voice and that all vestiges of imposter syndrome have been well and truly vanquished. And so, friends, let me echo Prof. Hendricks' words, and I bring to you our Professor Itumeleng Mosala. Prof, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lionel. And thank you, Prof. Hendricks. The only wrong thing you said in those wonderful words you gave me related to wine. I'm a Methodist, so we don't drink in the Methodist Church. So I just wanted to reaffirm that that fact that we don't drink. And I now realize that you must have been depriving me of some good wines at your place, having said so. Thank you very much. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here tonight. I must thank the organizers, the managers, and the leaders of this platform. I come in and out sometimes, as you know, lately, and I'm very sorry about this. I would have hoped for a much quieter life at this stage, but as things turned out, here I am. I'm busier, I think, qualitatively speaking, I'm busier than I used to be in all my years and my career as an academic and in the other work that I have done ever since. I would like, I don't know what the structure of of tonight, the total structure of tonight is going to be like. I don't know whether there will be conversation. And if there will be, I would like to very much not use up all the time with the words that I will share with you. I'd rather be able to get into some kind of conversational time and not deprive and be selfish. There's lots to say. At my age, I've been everywhere. I've seen many things. I've met many people. I really, really, really feel very grateful to God for all the things that have happened. And so I would very much also like to just hear what colleagues have to say. You know, when you are speaking from home, you have to keep muting your video because you have no control over the young ones who come in and out. They are quite curious about what is happening. So when you see me mute my video, it is because I have partners here with me in the house. But thank you very much. I am delighted and I'm grateful, and I would like to just express my thanks to all of you. Where do I start? I think it would be a long story if I start by saying too much about my very early years as a person. I think those will be properly covered by people on the day of the last journey, when people say goodbye to me forever. They'll cover those ones. I'm sure they will. I'm sure a lot of my friends will be there. I'm sure some of you will be there also, and so I'll save you from that part of my life. Let me talk about career. I went to the theological seminary in Alice in 1974. And I just wanted the first matter that I want to talk about. I made some notes here, and I've called the first part of these notes people, events, factors, and moments. It's not a number, it's not a lot of notes. The first person that I came into contact with at the Federal Theological Seminary in Alice in 1974 was a fellow probationer minister of the Methodist Church, an ex-Robben Islander. And it was wonderful to actually, I had not met anyone from Robben Island or from prison in general, except members of the family from time to time when I was growing up. So I had the privilege of meeting a gentleman called Neville Ncube. Now, Neville Ncube had been to prison at the same time as our Bishop Mokgoba, Stan Mokgoba, and both of them had subsequently become ministers, or at least joined the Methodist Church, trained, and Brother Stan was a lecturer when I arrived there. Neville was a student. He was, I think, 2 years ahead of me, or a year ahead of me at the seminary. So we got very close with Neville. And my encounter with him was an encounter with the Pan-Africanist ideology and perspective. And in fact, I had the privilege of spending many hours with him telling me about how he got arrested, how he ended up on Robben Island, how on arrival there on Robben Island, there were not any facilities such as the ones that came to be after they left the prison, after they were released from prison. He says for the first 18 months, they didn't wash because there were no washing facilities. In fact, they had to build the showers and the bathrooms themselves. And they had their first, and he has a great sense of humor. And he would laugh about it and say, you know, you can't imagine the shower after 18 months of not washing. And of course, for me, that was not funny. I didn't particularly share his sense of humor on the matter. But then the other thing that came from my conversation with him at that time had to do with the Bible and the toilet. He told me the story of how in each cell they had a toilet bucket and a Bible. The only two things in his cell were a Bible and a toilet bucket. And he says that there were no toilet papers. Of course, I mean, many of us didn't have toilet papers even in our homes. You know, we all made a plan with regard to that matter. Newspapers were very useful. Nobody ever threw away newspapers, and other plans that were made. So in itself, that issue was not until you had the relationship between the toilet bucket and the Bible. This story changes and assumes an ugliness that you just don't want to know and don't want to hear. So he talked to me about how the other prisoners in the other cells, how they tore pieces of paper, pages of the Bible, and somehow had to put them to use in the only way possible in a situation like the one that he was in. And that with time, many people finished their Bible. And the problem was that then they were thrown back to the default position. And so they would talk about, you know, how much more, when they go to the quarry or they were somewhere together, they would talk about how much more paper they still had. And, you know, he kept on telling them that mine is still complete. I have all the pages of my Bible. And people didn't believe him. And eventually, of course, everybody else completely finished the pages of paper that they had with themselves in there. And so the climax of the story was that he then said people started wanting to demand that he must share what was remaining with him. And to save time, I can tell you that what really hit me was that he told him that he would never use his Bible like that. He will not share it. If necessary, he would sacrifice his life than share any part of his Bible in that sort of way. That story stayed with me. The story of the 18 months of not washing meant nothing until I heard that particular story. And then, of course, he talked to me about the PAC ideology. So my own conversion politically was first and foremost to the Pan-Africanist ideology, not to the party. I wasn't quite ready or available to be converted to the party, because as fate would have it, before I went to the seminary, I was a probationer minister 1 year in Bloemfontein and another year in Kroonstad in the Free State, following the death of Reverend Seth Mukitim, about whom I'll say something very quickly in a little while. I had met someone, I don't know how many people would know, Professor Ben Kwapa. Professor Ben Kwapa used to work for an organization, I think it was related to the South African Council of Churches in some sort of way. And he used to move around the country and hold seminars. And he had come to visit in Bloemfontein during my time there when I was a young probationer. And he had talked to me about the South African Student Organization, an organization that was started by students, Black students in campuses, the leadership of which were our own Bani Pichana, our own Steve Biko, our own Nkgopo Tshitiro, and many other great stalwarts, great stalwarts. And he had talked to me about that. And in fact, I had been caught up in a conversation, almost a fight with a friend of mine that I had grown up with in Bloemfontein on the issue of theology, right at that time, even before I had gone to the seminary, because another homeboy of mine who was at the University of the North, who had joined the South African Student Organization, SASO, had come back home during the holidays and conscientized us and told us about all of those things. I mean, this was not, he had been my classmate, but he had gone, when I went into the ministry and started training, he went to TEFROP at that time. And so he came back bringing the story, the good news of the Black consciousness philosophy. But another one who had just been around at home had heard from him that there was a movement called Black theology. And so came to talk to me about it, since we were all kind of friends. And I said to him, no, there's only theology. There's no such thing as Black theology. There's only theology. And I was very stubborn about it because I was new in the ministry and I was new in things theological, and the dominant theological speak and theological thinking was that theology is about just God and the things of God, and that you can add things like color to it. And so when Ben Kwapa came around and was beginning to talk about different kinds of perspectives, I was getting armed, and I arrived at the seminary, back to that scene at the seminary, already partly ready for a different battle altogether on the issues relating to theology. But before I actually went there, just on my eve of going to the seminary, I attended a conference in Umtata, I think it was 1972, a conference of an organization called IDAMASA, Interdenominational Ministers Association of South Africa. I think I'm exegeting it properly. Comrade Bani, if you are there, IDAMASA, that's what it was, interdenominational. It was an organization of Black ministers across, an ecumenical association of Black ministers. Was led by Reverend Mahlasela from PE. He was a Methodist minister in Port Elizabeth, one of the giants. I had gone along in my very first year as a probationer minister with all of the other ministers to attend that conference in Ngambedlana in Umtata. And guess who I meet there? I meet Steve Biko and Harry Nengwenkulu. Now, I had only ever seen a photograph of Steve Biko. I hadn't seen a photograph of Harry Nengwenkulu. I hope Harry is here. I don't know if he'll remember that I was probably the youngest minister amongst the people who were there at that time. This was 1972. And of course, Steve and Harry did not waste time to try to begin to conscientize me and to recruit me and to tell me about a rising movement of Black people that had taken all the campuses, stormed them, and were beginning to do things that had not been done before. And so that was my encounter with Black consciousness. And I get to the seminary in 1974, already very much a BC activist, a la Brabem Khwapa, a la Steve, a la Henry Nongwenkulu. And of course, all of the other people who were on campuses came home and conscientized us during the holidays. And then, of course, the real battle for me starts in the classroom. I was very lucky to have met Dr. Simon Kubule before I got to the seminary. I had been, I had entered the ministry through the Reverend Seth Mukitimi, who was the superintendent minister in the circuit where I offered to be a minister. And in fact, I was his last candidate, him and a friend of mine called Reverend Fraser Kalishani. The two of us were his very last candidates, and he died in 1972, before 1972 years. He died, and I stayed in his manse with his family, and I had the privilege of having access and spending time to read his sermons. All his sermons had been written in full, verbatim. And they had been written, he had preached them from 1934 to 1972 when he died. And after he died, Reverend Dr. Simon Kubule drove all the way from Alice to come and collect boxes and boxes. I handed over those boxes of sermons to Reverend Simon Kubule because the decision was taken very, very quickly that it would be very important for that legacy of proclamation to go to a place like a seminary or a college where generations of people coming behind would have the opportunity to just read a sermon and enjoy a written sermon. Read a sermon and enjoy a written sermon. It's one thing to listen to a sermon. It's quite another to read a sermon. And the sermon is written. And all of those sermons were written in all the languages that I knew in South Africa, and I think probably limited only by the fact that he had worked in the south of the country. There were sermons in isiZulu, sermons in isiXhosa, sermons in Sesotho, sermons in Setswana, sermons in Afrikaans, and sermons in English. Among all the sermons that were written in 1934, or from 1934 to 1972, when Seth Mukitimi died. So I had that background, and guess what? I get to the seminary, and who is teaching me in class? The very man himself, Dr. Simon Kubule. One of the things that I remember most about that experience was what he started by saying. He started by saying to us that all the things we have known, had known up to the time we got there, are going to be dismantled, including ourselves. He's going to take off all the heresy, all the noise we had been acquired to making, and he's going to start us all from scratch and make out of us pastors, leaders, theologians, intellectuals, those of us who chose that. And that was very impressive introduction to not only a life of a spiritual life, as a life of servanthood, but also a life of the pursuit of knowledge. I took decisions as early as all that I think I wanted to go the the life of the mind. So then the problem arose about what it means to be Black and to have all of those books written by white people. And not only were they white, but they were non-South African. Not only were they non-South African, they were colonial. And not only were they colonial, they were former slave masters. And all of those things started to become part of what goes into my theological reflection. It wasn't just my theological reflection, it was all of us. There were several of us. I had hoped that I would make a call to Brother Steve Munjani of the Anglican Church and tell him that I will be talking about people like him tonight. He was my classmate. He was already about 40 years old at the time. I was about 20, I can't remember, 23, 24 at the time. And in our class, there were 5 of us. There was 1 Anglican, there was 1 Presbyterian, there was 1 Congregationalist, and there was me in the Methodist Church. And the struggle started. The struggle of the mind, the struggle with theology, the struggle with ecclesiastical studies, the struggle with ethics, the struggle with the New Testament, and the struggle with the Old Testament. And for me, the issue of how a man can defend the Bible. He was, I think he was 6 or 7 years on Robben Island. And in all of those years, he protected the Bible when others used them. And understandably, remember, I'm not particularly blaming people for doing that. The situation of being in prison under conditions of Robben Island, we're told, were very, very extreme indeed. So it's not like they were more sinful than him. And then perhaps I don't know. I don't know whether I would have defended it myself. But that story stays with me, and I'll come back to it. I'll come back to that story. Then, of course, the movement had started. There was Fort Hare with us there, the University of Fort Hare. There was the seminary. There were the colleges. There were the hospitals and nurses' homes. There were the boarding schools in that area. And generally speaking, the struggle had simply started. We were at war with the system every day in every kind of way. I have a memory of Mapetla Mohapi and Tate Lekota, Lekota and Mohapi coming to give seminars, political seminars on campus at Fort Hare and in the seminary, and they were dedicating their lives to the struggle for the liberation of our country. And I never forget the evenings. I never forgot some of the things that they had to deal with. One night we were in a seminar and they had spoken and there was discussion, and all of a sudden somebody said, there's a problem. And when they said, what's the problem? They said, there's a spy amongst us. And you know, those days, that was a dangerous thing to discover because people could deal with people. And so Lekota suggested that we should take a break. It was in the evening, it was dark, there weren't many lights in Alice at that time. Let's take a break and let the smokers go and smoke. Let's give the sellout, let's leave the sellout an opportunity to run into the dark. And the people said, no, we're not going to sacrifice our meeting. We want to know who he is, who it is. And I find myself standing up and saying, okay, we can't do that. If we do that, you know, we're getting off course, you know. And I suggested that, can we just switch off the lights? And then we switched off the lights. Somebody agreed to switch off the light, and somebody named the spy. And the spy jumped out of the meeting and ran into the dark. And before we knew it, the police had surrounded the hall where we were meeting. I'm just saying that the struggle had started, and the struggle was not to stop. There are many things one could talk about in that context. And for me, the Bible issue continued to eat me up. I started worrying about whose Bible is this Bible. I started having problems with interpretations that were made. But more importantly, I think I started having problems with the sermons we preach out of that Bible. The problem was twofold. The one part of it for me was that colleagues didn't seem to take seriously the need for applying critical tools to the Bible so that we can get the best out of it. The other problem for me was whether we should be wasting our time with this book. I started wondering about whether there are not other Bibles out there, whether Africans themselves could not put forth alternative Bibles, whether other nations were not doing so. Of course, being in an ecumenical seminary, it wasn't difficult for our teachers to begin to tell us that there is ecumenism of faith and ecumenism of scriptures. There are other Bibles for other nations. The problem was, so why are we stuck with somebody else's book for our situation? But that was fine. I survived. I finished the seminary. I had good lecturers, and they were nice to me. I think I was problematic, but I think people were able to bear with me. And then so we finished. And of course, I was a bit disappointed that I actually got a distinction in Hebrew Bible and Hebrew literature. I thought this is a problem. This is a political problem. I like the fact that academically I seem to be doing well, but politically, what does this mean? And then, of course, I must mention, we had the brilliance and the opportunity of the likes of Chabani Manganyi, who has just departed recently. We were reading not only James Cone, whom we read every day. We bought everything we came across. We were reading our own in South Africa. Chabani Manganyi, Being Black in the World. It's the only book that was not a theological book that I was reading at the time. And I read it, and I read it, and I read it. And of course, the likes of Steve and Nkgopotse and all the leaders, the senior leaders of Black Consciousness Movement, help us to also to read people like Fanon. And that doesn't get out of fashion. Everybody, every Black person must read at least one book of Fanon. And yeah, if I had time, I would talk about my own experience with Fanon. But people were good to me. People were good to me at the level of staff. People were good to me in the church. People were good to me at home. But above all, people were good to me in the movement. The Black Consciousness Movement, the Black Consciousness philosophy. It was straightforward. It was simple. It's a state of mind. Yeah. And it's a way of life. And that was enough for us. You can write books on it and do stuff, but it is a way of life. It's a state of mind. And so we understood that. We went out and did things. In end of 1974, we had to leave the seminary because the government had decided to kick out the seminary from Fort Hare. There were 6 of us who said, that's fine if the government wants to take us out of here. The government had locked up Bani Pichana or banned Bani Pichana, that locked up Steve Biko, that locked up people that killed already by that time, that killed Nkgopotse Tiro. And the government can do anything, but we don't have to agree. we don't have to say yes. The seminary did not agree with us on that particular matter. The seminary decided to voluntarily pack and go. We said, no, let them take us out. And 6 of us consulted with Steve. Brother Steve Munchani went and talked to Steve, was under house arrest in Ginsberg. Brother Steve Munchani went to go and talk to him and get a line for us. And Steve said, block the trucks. And so we decided on the day of the trucks that the trucks were not going to get in. And we had hoped that the rest of the students would join us. And long and short of it, the rest of the students did not join us. The staff came to plead with us to just let them come in and let us go. But we were not going to do that. The rest is history. We got locked up in the Anglican chaplain to enable the seminary to be able to voluntarily leave Fort Hare, to leave Alice. And 2 or 3 days after they were gone, they opened up the chaplain. They opened up the place where we were locked, so we could get out. Fortunately, Brother Steve had a car, so we got into the car and went to see Steve before we left to follow the rest of the seminary in Umtata, where they were. When we got there, it was time to have the commemoration, March 21st commemoration. And we organized the lecturers. We had Stan Mokoba there. We had the lecturer who was at the Congregational College. I can't remember his name, Babangidi. And we had somebody from each one of the colleges. We were able to get Dr. Dwani to come in and to go in with us just to commemorate March 21st, Sharpeville. And of course, that got us into trouble. We were arrested. We were beaten up by the Matanzima regime, and the seminary had hardly settled, and Matanzima demanded that we should be expelled, otherwise he was going to expel the seminary. Long story short, we would not apologize for that, and the seminary was eventually thrown out of Umtata, out of the homeland, and we landed in Pietermaritzburg. So we were 1 year in Alice, 1 year in Umtata, and 1 year in Pietermaritzburg. And then June 16 exploded in 1976 while we were in Pietermaritzburg. I will not talk about the details of what happened at that time. My memory is that we were able to make a visit to Soweto for a day or 2. We actually had to get in and we had to get out quickly, and we went back. And the last I remember of South Africa at that time, of relevant South Africa, was when we attended a meeting of the Black Consciousness Movement of SASO, which was chaired by Dr. Mampela Rampela and the guy who was the president of 1976 president of SASO at the time. Know him so well, I've forgotten his name now. Medical doctor himself. And shortly after that, my journey was beginning to shape itself in terms of an opportunity to get out of the country at that time. Again, Simon Kubule played a great role in that. So did Stan Mokoba. And Mgojo had joined the seminary at that time. But it was quite clear to me that there are other people who can do the work at home. Whatever it is that needed to be done, I'm not the only one who can do it, but that it might be a good idea to go and pursue this matter of the Bible and the struggle. And in 1977, I left the country. I married and then left. I married and left a wife here. She's listening to me. But I married and I left her and landed in Manchester. In Manchester, the struggle continued. First of all, there was the there was the problem of what exactly I was going to study there. So the principal of my college at the University of Manchester, who had played a role in putting together the money, and that bursary was a bursary in support of the struggle in South Africa. I was most grateful for it. So I wasn't going to be too problematic to people. I was going to be respectful, but I wasn't going to do what I didn't want to do. So I interacted. My professor said to me, I think you must do something in social ethics. So I said, okay, social ethics is fine, but is it possible to do something on revolution as well? She says, but there's no one who can help you with revolution here. I says, no, there are lots of books on revolution. I'll just read books on revolution. No problem, don't worry about that. I did a dissertation for my honors on arrival that first year. And the title of the dissertation was Social Ethics and Violent Revolution in South Africa. It was a hard research. It was a small piece of research, but it was a hard research I had to work through. Much as I had kind of done well as a student at the seminary, I was coming across things that were new to me, that were difficult to me, but that I saw they were very important. The long and short of it is that I completed that in end of 1977 and submitted that dissertation, and I was allowed to do my master's degree. I was registered for an MA, and then there was even more of a problem on that, because now I insisted on the Bible. I insisted on the Bible. I had an issue with the Bible. And I had a supervisor who was himself an exile. He had come from, what is that place in Eastern Europe? His parents had been exiles in England from, not Lufthansa, what is that place called? Latvia. He was from Latvia. Professor Anderson was my supervisor. So we talked about what I was going to research and write about. And he said to me, and goodness me, you know, I think back and I think I should have listened to him, but that's okay. He said to me, listen, I think you should research corruption. I said, no. That's not our challenge. Our challenge, we know that the Boers are corrupt. There's nothing to prove there. That's not our issue. Our issue is revolution. Our issue is justice, peace and justice, and revolution. Help me find a topic on that. So we argued and argued, but eventually I said to him, no, I'd rather go back home. I'm not going to study corruption. He said to me, justice cannot survive if the foundations on which it is being mounted are made up of corruption. I said, Moren. Well, I didn't put it in Setswana. I didn't say Moren. I said, say, I want to write about revolution. So he allowed me, and I chose the subject of political revolutions, political revolts in the early Israelite monarchy. I had been quite conscious that the vision of Joshua and Moses had been betrayed, that things were beginning to go wrong in Israel. And that none of us preach about that. None of us talk about this. None of us directly address what actually went wrong. At least I wasn't doing that. But I wanted to deal with the people's revolts in the early Israelite monarchy, and I wrote my dissertation on social justice in the early Israelite monarchy under King David. And that was that. And I passed and I left. I landed in Botswana. And do revolution in my head, I had to find ways of doing it in the classroom and as a teacher in Botswana. And I met a man called Professor Dak. We had met in Europe previously. And we used to meet for devotions just between the two of us every morning on campus for about 6 or 6:30 and read some scriptures. So I then said to him, but I don't know if I want to read scriptures. I want revolution, but I'm not so sure about the scriptures and the revolution. So he says, what do you want to do? I said, no, I want to do something about my people's faith and religion. I want to do something for the African independent churches. I think I'm going to do my PhD on that. And he said to me, no, you're not going to do that. That's not going to help you to understand the white man. He says, I said, well, what are you doing? How are you understanding? He said, I'm doing systematic theology. I don't want anybody ever again to teach me systematic theology. I want to teach systematic theology myself. So he persuaded me. And I remembered that one time when I was researching my MA, I'd come across the writings of a man called Norman Gottwald, who began to reinterpret and reanalyze the Exodus texts and the Exodus itself, and the freedom that the Exodus concept is supposed to have delivered for the people of Israel. And he started applying sociological and other tools to the texts and archaeological tools to things that are talked about in the Bible. And he was uncovering things that when you go to the seminary or you go to the Bible the first time and you are burdened with the kind of stuff we get taught, you never ever get the opportunity to understand the things that are in the Bible. You go in, you spend your time, you come in, you are as good as if you had not made the effort. So I started to remember that. And so we started thinking about what one day I will write about. I wasn't sure about that, but we kept on reading the scriptures and finding things. And all of a sudden, my suspicions were confirmed that this book, the Bible, is a revolutionary book. And all of the work I started to do at that time was focused on proving that hypothesis. Until I came back to South Africa to join the faculty at the University of Botswana. And when I got there and read more and more and talked more and more and attended conferences more and more, I found out that it is wrong to say that the book is revolutionary. And I started to discover a lot of reactionary things in the book, particularly in the light of the rise of the strong feminist movement that was hitting the world at that time. And I do remember Takazo and I traveling through Geneva and calling in at Comrade Bani Pichana's office in the unit, the combat racism unit that he was leading. We'd gone there to ask for money from him because we were setting up Black theology. We thought, no, everything must start, whether it is biblical studies, whether it is systematic theology, whether it is everything for us, everything starts with Black theology. In fact, Black theology itself has an epistemic starting point in Blackness. So Black consciousness, Black reality, there was going to be no, we were back where we started in the early 1970s in the Black consciousness movement. It's a way of life. It's a state of mind. We were back then saying, now, those tools must come back. And so I stopped calling myself a biblical scholar. I called myself a Black theologian. He stopped calling himself a systematic theologian. He called himself a Black theologian with the main platform, Black theology. It is a theology of Black people. It was there before the writers wrote about it. It was there before Mosala came. It was there before Takatso came. It is there. It is immanent in the situation of our people. And unless we come to terms with that situation, we understand that situation, we just simply can't write the theology that is correct for our people. It is about liberation, actually. So I set myself the task of finding out how I could, well, I knew, first of all, that the Bible as it stands cannot liberate me. And so I looked for ways in which I could help the Bible to help me. And I started digging deeper. And the deeper I dug, the more I found out that actually I don't have to have the Bible. The Bible is going to help me, because the Bible is deeper, what's the word I'm looking for? The Bible is founded on a struggle that people have tried for thousands of years to suppress in the very text of the Bible. There is no single biblical truth. In fact, what you have in the Bible are people's struggles in the very pages of the Bible. And it was quite clear to me that unless you liberate the Bible cannot liberate you. An unliberated Bible does not liberate. So we were back where we started. And then we started to write. I started to write. I started to say, starting point is my people, starting point is my country, starting point is my faith. The Bible already starts there. If I don't see that, the problem is mine. And I had been in the Black consciousness movement since the time I told you about, early 70s. I had participated in the structures of the movement in different kinds of ways. I don't know if Professor Pichana will remember that when he arrived in London, I think it was myself and Steny Moodley's younger brother and another reverend of the Methodist Church who was in London, was at the University of London, who was studying, was about to come back home. That we went to meet him at the airport, and I had come down from Manchester. I was very excited with him coming through, and I was wearing a beret with Karl Marx's pin on it. And I don't know if Bani will remember that he asked me, "What is this now?" And I must say, I haven't talked to him about it again, but I was very disappointed, because for me, the tools were now many. The tools were multiple. I was searching for more and more and more truth. And I had been a follower all of those years because I thought I had a project and a program that would take up all my time. And then came 1990, and the movement here at home asked me if I could agree to be president of AZAPO. And of course, the first thing I said was, guys, you know, AZAPO was not here when I left. I left here a member of SASO. And comrade said, in this movement we serve. And that incidentally reminds me of my last conversation with Steve. He came to see us in Umtata when we were there because we had separated ourselves from other members of the organization, of the student body. And he arrived there at great risk to himself because he arrived when Mapetla Mohape was and his wife were released from detention. There was a little Gomba and reception we were doing for them. And somehow Steve arrived there and he just pulled the six of us and said to us, the Black Consciousness Movement is more important than you. I've never forgotten those words. And so when comrades say, please serve, I thought about myself. I said, but my movement, at the time I had come from the BCMA in Botswana, and I had issues trying to get myself into AZAPO, and the comrades said, there is change in the air, things are happening in South Africa, we need you to lead. And I agreed at that time, and the rest is history. My dissertation was very difficult. It was with a person that Bunny knows, Professor Villavicencio was him and Wanamaker were my supervisors here. They were both white, and we had big fights. And so I had to ask them if I can have another supervisor. And I then got an extra supervisor who was Cornel West in the US, and Norman Gottwald. So I had 3 white people and 1 black person. And I was trying to write a black dissertation. So struggle is struggle. Struggle is struggle. And we agreed with Villavicencio. He said to me one day, Mosala, I'm tired of you. He said to me, so done with it. You have all your life to go back to your.
Oh dear, sorry about that.
Are we losing Prof. Slilo?
Yes, we are.
I think we are.
Sadly. Very sad.
Yeah, I think we are losing him because his connection has been going on and off. But friends, it is such, you know, I could listen to Prof. Mosala all day because really he is just bringing us into the confidence of what his experience in the world, not just in South Africa, has been while he was fighting the South African fight, then the African fight, and the Black fight, really. I think it would be amiss for us to continue without him because we only have two items that are left, and I'm not sure if someone could just try and get him back.
I'm
Okay.
back. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. I
No
don't know whether
problem,
I
Prof.
talked about my white friends. Maybe that's the reason why this thing revolted.
Prof, maybe.
I'm actually done. I'm actually done. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Prof. I was just saying while you were cut off that I could listen to you all day because you were telling us about the fight, not just the fight, the South African fight, but the African fight, the Black fight that all Black people can relate. And for that, Tawa, really, 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 we are eternally grateful to you. I have a little bit of a surprise for you, and I am hoping that I will be able to run with it. So, Prof, we used our connections, and I am going to read a note. It is a very long note, which actually tells me that an apple does not fall far from the tree. It is a note from your daughter, Lebo. It is very long, and I'm going to make sure that you get the full write-up after this. And it says, "My father, my hero, a giant amongst men. He has lived at a time of great oppression by white South African Boers or Afrikaners. He was once the queen subject, being born in colonist South Africa under Great Britain. He lived at a time before TVs, when black homes did not have electricity or a toilet in the house. He has seen the birth of computers, cell phones, and been alive during the Korean War, Rhodesian Bush War, Mozambican Civil War, South African Border War, Natal Civil War, Operation Boleas, and the current war against humanity in the form of our people's dignity, economic capabilities, and opportunities. A man with rich history, an academic, a public intellectual, corporate finance manager, researcher, and a business consultant." And I am also, after what you've just said, I also want to read one of the paragraphs from her. It says, "With three great influences being Jesus, Marx, and Steve Biko, Mosala has ministered, influenced, led, taught, and created one of the most unique imprints and contributions in
Slaelo, we're
society through
losing
his
you.
work, his ideologies, and writings. Mosala was once quote, "Give up being a Christian." Yes. Oh, am I back?
Yeah,
Can
you're
you
back.
hear me?
Yes, we lost you momentarily.
Okay, no, I think we can just send the write-up to Prof after this. And now I'm going to give Prof, I know you said that you were open to having a conversational time, but I'm afraid that we are going to not have enough time to engage in that conversational time. And I'm going to now give to Prof Bani Pikiana, who's going to respond on behalf of the Center for Constructive Theology. Prof Pikiana.
Thank you very much, Lila. I have to say, Itumeleng, I have to say, wow, that was just this sort of story that many of us need to hear. It is very, very important that that story be heard straight from the horse's mouth, because the kind of threading and welding together of experience and insight and argumentative and discovery, and really seeing different parts of the world and arguing with oneself and with whoever, really has helped us to understand how it has molded somebody who's a thinker and who's thoughtful, like you. I have to say that we don't say this very often. Those of us who are in the liberation movement in BC, we don't say it enough how proud we are of many of us who've really been through it all, and at the same time gathered a lot of material that actually is necessary for the maturation of our humanity and the freedom that we actually do need and which we seek to serve. And for that reason, we thank you. We thank you, Itumeleng, for really taking time. I was really only asked this afternoon if I would say something, and I didn't know what you were going to say. But I think what you said, I could never have imagined that you are going to take the task in the manner in which you have, which has got a lot of depth, which is also very, very profoundly personal. You did not say that, but I myself remember some of those moments at the Methodist ministers. I think something tells me about Kambela, Reverend Kambela.
Yes.
And there was another one, Poselwa Gwebelentlanzi. Is that his right name? I'm not sure that I remember it very well. Now these guys had an amazing passion, and they understood and really were really shaping their own ministry in the way in which they believe was relevant and important and necessary. I was very sad to hear that Gwebelentlanzi was murdered in the Transkei, as it was at the time, because here's somebody who really was prepared to give up everything in order to minister to the people in the manner and in the way in which he understood what ministry was about for his time. and so those influences in shaping Itumeleng were very, very important, very vital. What he's not saying so directly, from my recollection, and by the way, I was not a theology person, I was trying to be a lawyer. But my recollection, those Idamasa conferences you're talking about, was really this kind of searching to try to understand God, to understand what God was about, was doing in our lives, what God's role was in the existential situation that we found ourselves in, who God was for us at that time. So it's absolutely amazing when you think about it. All of these people who were fighting oppression, for somehow they had time to think and talk about God as a problematic factor in their lives, by the way. That the idea of God was very problematic. But I think with the likes of Itumeleng, it was this desire to understand who God is and what God was that actually became the instrument for shaping a God for liberation, a God for ourselves, a God for our ancestors, a God for our futures as well. And the way you did it, I'm kind of reminded by two particular books that actually explain how their own thinking and theology emerged.
Mfundisi Siwa is Mfundisi Siwa who's talking. Please mute yourself. Thank you. Sorry, Prof.
My first reference is really to you mentioned Chabani Manganya, who's just passed away, and his book in 1973, Being Black in the World, was a hugely emphatically influential, because it brought theory to much of the thinking that we're doing at that time. But even more for me, I found his book of being a Black psychologist, where he is really trying to understand how his experience and that of his people shaped his thinking about psychology and about his discipline, about the politics, about the world at large. And those two things became quite important. In a sense, you've done that for us today, Itumeleng, and in an extremely exciting way, if I may say so. The other one was James Cone. James had written lots of other books, and so at some point, he sat back and tried to say to himself, but how did I get here? What are the things that actually shaped my thinking as a Black AME, black church and all of that. How did it get me here? Because there are so many others whom it didn't get here at all. So his short, small book, My Soul Looks Back, is a very fascinating study of Jim Cone about how his idea of being black and being church and being and searching to understand God in his time was very, very important. So what does that say? This is my last bit, Silailo. What does that say about us? It says about us that being a man or a person of faith doesn't mean that you don't think. It doesn't mean that you stop to think and to think critically. And I think what Dr. Kubule was saying to Mosala and his first year group, that you cannot be a person of deep faith if you do not think and think critically. If you're not prepared to actually undo whatever else was there before and begin to shape your own way of believing, your own understanding of faith, because sooner or later you'll be with nothing. So in the end, the faith that you critically construct for yourself is a faith that in fact is what is going to shape you forever. So in many ways, I don't want to go beyond this. In many ways, that's really what we should be thinking about in South Africa today. There's just so many talking about God and about faith. There's so many people talking about being black these days, and so many people who think that the idea of being black in itself is what makes a revolution. So really, we really need to think and to think critically, to think our faith critically, to think our politics critically, and to construct our future critically. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. Pikiela, for that response. I feel like my mind is gonna get blown because as the both of you are talking, I'm realizing that as young people, especially South Africans, we are so spoiled with great minds, great intellects, people who have gone before us in order for us to enjoy the life that we have today, and most of which we do not take seriously. You know, we take things for granted because things are just there for us. And when I'm hearing you saying that being a person of faith requires you to think deeply and critically, I'm also matching it to what Prof. Mosala said early on when he said that an unliberated Bible cannot liberate. So it's only someone who has deep faith that can think about that. And now he's giving it to us to mull over. And one thing I'm taking as we draw to a close, Prof. Mosala, from you is that you had issues with certain things in the Bible, and you did not just sit and talk about them, but what you did, you went back and you wrote. You put your mind onto a pen and you put a pen onto the paper. So that is the one thing that I believe we need to do. We can't just fight with our words, but we also have to do the work. We should stop allowing people who are not us to write about us and tell us who we are. We need to write the books and say, this is who we are because we are who we are. And may God bless you, Prof. Mosala. I am now going to give for a vote of thanks and a closure to Mfundisi S.J. Mthethwa. He'll just give us a vote of thanks and then he will close for us with a prayer. Mfundisi Mthethwa.
Thank you very much, also Silaelo, for driving this very in your own way, very distinctly in your own way. We appreciate it. Thank you to the esteemed leaders who attended. We had about at one point 100 people who were part of this this webinar, and it doesn't happen every day that you have a full house where people are not together in the house and they're using virtual technology to meet. Prof. Mosala and I go back when I was a much younger man than I am now. He's in his 70s now, and I'm treading just a little behind. But when I was much younger, he's taught me a few things through the talk that he made this evening. And thank you very much, Prof. Kumalo, for the way you have brought the esteemed group of leaders, academic leaders as well, as well as church leaders who are ministers and clergy and priests and servants of the people. Prof, we spoke on Saturday, my president, my tower, that you said a few things. First of all, an intellectual, the kind of erstwhile intellectual that you've been, and an ordained minister of the word of God and the sacraments of God. An astute politician. When you were a member of the Azanian People's Organization, I would sit at the back at congresses and listen to you. So our conversations don't begin with theology. They begin with your election into the presidency of the Azanian People's Organization. And I was part of those congresses. Your stature as a consummate public servant of the finest pedigree, that you have led from chief directorship through the position of a director general for so many years, but also now as head of the Commission on State Capture. And there are no green flies coming after you. We are proud of that. You've taught me and many of us a few things. One was in terms of race relations, there is no gray area. Things are black or white. People are black or white. And in terms of how you begin to deconstruct the power relations there, I became a student of Black theology and an activist of Black consciousness very young, when I had people like Bishop Dwane, Dr. Dwane, Reverend Dr. Simon Kubule, Reverend Dr. Mgojo, Kosa Mgojo, and those people taught me theology when I was one of the youngest at the Federal Theological Seminary. And I began to learn about the epistemological rupture in Black theology and Black consciousness. How do you get this influence to begin to say there are no gray areas in life, they're black and white? I learned tonight from among so many writings that you have made, when you shared with us, you taught me how to be angry as a Black man, as a young theologian, as a young clergyman. You taught me how to be angry as a minister of the word and sacrament. In a church like that which I belong to, the Uniting Presbyterian Church, which has Black people and white people, and there is nothing in between. And so the trick was to manage the anger. I don't know if I've done that well. The other thing that I learned from you through what you shared with us tonight, and Kukwila Tipani also coming to this, your storytelling, the way we begin to deal with we deal with the struggle, the revolution, the pain of being Black, the challenge of being Black in a world that's very hostile towards Blackness. And so some of us have learned tonight how you're able to deal with Black pain, Black anger, Black exclusion, Black as a Black family, the Black community as a center of how you are going to do biblical hermeneutics. I'm wanting to close by saying, from you and your writings and the writings of Takatso and Mokgeti Motlabi and Simon Maimela and James Cone and Gayrod Wilmore, I began to understand that Black is beautiful. If Jesus was going to be my savior, that Jesus would be Black like me. That Jesus would be the Black Messiah, Albert Cleage. And so I began to gobble, and we learned through this journey that you shared with us tonight. The roles played by Pantobiko, Ongfuputse Tiro, Nyameko Pityana, Mapetla Mohapi, Mtuliga Shezi, Kehla Mtembu, Bobra Ishim Kabela. I saw he was part of this. Sets Cooper, PC Jones, Bostrini Moodley. I in my first year at the University of Natal at the time in Pietermaritzburg, the person closest for me to bring in to share the kind of stories that you've shared with us tonight was Trini Moodley. And when he walked into the room and he said, Sipo, you've grown so big. Aaron, Bo, Bra Ben Kwapa, Bo, George Wakop, Bo, Dr. Khomolimo Mokai, Bo, Dr. Nchaupe Mukwapi, Bo Prof Rangwedzi, Nengwe Kulu, Bo Muntuka Mieza. Ndibalantoni, Bo Msibudi Mangena, Bo Mkutsweu Motsao. We're saying as we close that it was cogent, it was apt that we got you to close this year. You were the right person to close the year for us. And if we go back, you could realize that we can go for the whole day and for the whole night and for another day and for another night and for another day and another night and another day and another night, listening to the stories that you have shared with us. Thank you for your hindsight, for your insight, and for your foresight. We deeply value and appreciate that you shared this with us, my tower, my president. Thank you kindly, Osilayelo. And we would like to thank all those who also tuned in, and those who are still with us up to this end. We thank you very much, Abdinyameko, for your response. Prof. Pityana, we thank you, Muruti Kanyile, for opening. We thank you, Silayelo, for running the show. And we thank you, Mtungwa, for having created this group. It was an apt and cogent closing, and may God bless you all. Thank you kindly. Aluta.
Thank you so much, Muruti, for your reflection. Just before we close completely, let me just give thanks and props to the Center of Constructive Theology and every bright spark, every intellectual mind, every deep thinker, and every single person who is a part of the group to say, I thank you, and I really appreciate how you continue to let me grow, to use me so that I can continue to grow in doing what I absolutely love and what I believe that God has given me as a gift. And for all of those people who would love to be a part of the Center of Construction Theology, and you're on the Zoom chat, please leave your cell phone number in the chat box. And then I will make sure, because I'm driving this particular part of the program, I will make sure that I ask one of the big professors to add you to the group. This is the only time I get to tell old people what to do and they don't say no. And for that, I'm really, truly grateful. And so thank you to everyone. I want to see if I can, as part of closing, if I can share my screen. Share screen.
I am currently sitting in Ladysmith, and maybe that is why my connection is a bit manyoke. But I want to see if I can, I wanted to share, I don't think I'm winning. I wanted to share a song that we were told that you really, really love so much, Prof. Mosala. I do not know if anyone would like, Muruti, do you mind maybe closing for us with a prayer? And then I will see how I can try to play the video after the prayer. Muruti Mthetho.
Let us pray. Ararapeleng, Aikongeleni. Thank you, Lord, for this evening, for a beautiful evening, even if there are no stars in the sky, but it's your evening. And we thank you for fresh air and the rain that we've had in this part of the world, in KZN. We thank you for life itself and the fresh air that we share, and for tonight's insights from Professor Mosala and his journey and his story. We thank you for being our God, for the love you have shown to him and his family, Osluisa Lebana, and his journey as the servant of your people, the Laos of God, the Amha Arats. And now as we come to close, we want you to bless us. We beseech that you bless us and send us out into the world to serve you in grace, in peace, and in justice. And may the blessing of God Almighty, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be with us now and forevermore. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Friends,
Thank
I
you.
think I'm not winning the screen. We will make sure that the video gets to Prof. Mosala, and we will share it with all the members of the Center for of Constructive Theology. Friends, thank you so much. May God bless each and every one of you as we continue to give our living legends their flowers while they are still alive. And so may God bless each and every one of you, and good night, and God bless you.
Thank you, Oslayelo. Thank you, Tawa.